Hello, everyone. My name is Stephanie Emmerich, and I'm going to be your host today. And today we are here for the third webinar in our webinar series, A Conversation with Boys Town National Training. We're talking about engaging and managing learners in all types of environments. And our topic for today is talking about prompting and promoting positive behaviors, and small celebrations can equal a big success. And we have with us today Steph Jensen, and she has been with Boys Town. I'll let her introduce herself, but she has been with Boys Town for quite a few years. Welcome, Steph. And she works, you work with our clients and customers across the country on helping to implement the Boys Town education model and do so much more. Can you tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, and welcome, everyone. So my history with Boys Town, I say I have been a user of Boys Town for about 26 years. I actually went through my first Boys Town training. It was my second year of teaching. I was a middle school teacher, and my second year of teaching, our school decided to adopt the Boys Town model. And so I was trained in well-managed schools, and I can tell you it was a pivot point for me. That was, like I said, 27 years ago. My son was a year old, and I had a second child on the way. My husband and I had no idea what we were going to do as parents. We didn't know. There's no manual for that, right? And so when we went through the Boys Town training at the middle school, I started coming home every day and telling my husband, this is what we have to do, this is what we have to do. So not only did that initial training in well-managed schools shape my professional career, it also really shaped my personal career. So I have a long history applying the Boys Town model in multiple settings. Following that training almost 27 years ago, I started looking at the possibilities to work directly with Boys Town in their training department. So I have now been in the Boys Town training department for almost 19 years, working with clients, working with schools, programs, even governments, foreign country governments all over the world, in working with professionals on how to manage behavior. I like to say that many of us, we get into education because we love kids, right? We love working with kids. I don't believe that there's any of us that get into education because we don't like kids. Sometimes I think we end up not liking kids because we're in education. And my takeaway from that is it's not really the kids that we don't like, it's the behaviors that we have no tools to manage. And so that Boys Town training, like I said, really did transform my view of working with kids and specifically how to manage behaviors. So today we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about promoting positive behavior. What does that look like? What does it sound like? And how can we do it in our day-to-day? So welcome again, and as we get started, let's just take a temperature of what's going on in education with kids and families today. And as we do that, I'm going to go ahead and open this up, try and move here a little more seamlessly. Let me share this with all of you. Excellent.
And Steph, as you get started, I wanted to share with everyone, we are recording today, so no worries there. We will send out the email link when it is posted to our website so you can review it. You can share it with any coworkers who are not able to attend. Also, all attendees will be getting a packet, so you'll get all of the information that we talk about today and then some. So a little bit there. So we really want you to ask us questions, have your chat box open. I will be watching the chat box, so ask your questions as you're coming along. I will share them, and we really want this to be a conversation where we want to hear from you. We have some things that we want to talk about and share, but just want to make sure that everybody knows that, so you know what you're going to get. And also, in your follow-up email, there will be a link, so if any of you need a certificate for attendance that you want to show, we'll have that, so you'll be able to get that via email. So just a little housekeeping stuff we want to take care of. So now we're ready to go. So yeah, let's start up and set the foundation for our discussion of talking about where are we at? What is our current situation?
What is going on? And the headlines are big, right? We're seeing a lot of headlines in regards to education. It's a hot topic no matter what medium you're looking into. We are all concerned about kids. We are all concerned about our educators, and we're all concerned about this pandemic. So how is it affecting our day-to-day, and then also kind of project that out to some of the long-term effects of what we're seeing. And so as I looked through some of the headlines of news organizations and the AP, some of the things that really stuck out was, first of all, attendance and enrollment. Since COVID, and we've seen some of these bumps and hurdles, these ups and downs in attendance and enrollment with kiddos. As a matter of fact, as we look at some of these largest school districts, they are seeing a lot of kiddos that are missing, some of our lost kiddos, some of our kiddos that have just kind of disappeared into the void that we have not been able to connect with or to locate through some of these shifts in learning from home and online learning and some of the blended models. Now we're seeing people, some school districts are able to start coming back, but with that we are starting to identify the number of kiddos that are missing. And, we can look at a lot of different reasons for that. Some of these kiddos, we're hearing about learning pods. We haven't been able to identify how many of those or how many kiddos are being served through some of those community learning pods that people are putting together. We have some of those kiddos that are just doing some more homeschooling, which we really don't know at this point what that's going to look like long term. But then we do know that there is a good portion of these kiddos that are just disconnected. We're just missing some of those kids. And so with that attendance and that enrollment decline, there are a lot of potential problems with that. We know that. We need kiddos when they come to school. That is kind of their front line of defense. It's a lot of times for kids the place where they're getting their sustenance, their nutrition through the school, and they're getting some of that. The attention that they need, the support that they need is being done through the school. And so when they're missing out on that, we know that there are going to be some long-term impacts to that. So looking at that, how do we get them reconnected? When we started going on to those online platforms back in March, we did see some of the discrepancies in people that had the access and families that did not. So we're starting to address some of those issues, but we need to keep at the forefront the faces of these are kiddos. These are kids that are being lost, that are kind of in that void. So what do we do to motivate them to come back, and when they do come back, to get them to stay? I think that's one of the big issues when we look at attendance, is that we'll see some of those kiddos coming back, but then what are we doing to increase that motivation to get them to keep coming, especially if we're in an online or even a blended model? We're finding that to be very challenging. So what are some of those solutions to re-engaging once we start to get that enrollment back up to the numbers that we would like to see? Then what are we going to do to keep those kids engaged and increase some of that attendance? We also are seeing, as we look at this snapshot, and this is from the CDC, and they looked at this just looking from March until June. And this was a study, if you go to this report, the study was conducted during a 10-day period in June, and looking at the increases of depression and anxiety. We're finding that 5 to 11-year-olds, the increase in emergency room visits for mental health issues increased 25% during that time. So from March to June, we saw a 25% jump with our little people. In that same time frame, again from March until I think the end of that study, the end of that survey was June 24th. So we'll say from March until the end of June, 12 to 17-year-olds, we saw a 31% increase in those emergency room visits. This gives us a lot of information on how our kids are feeling about what is happening and really how they feel it is happening to them. They don't feel like they're a part of this. They feel like this is all being done to them, which makes them feel very powerless, out of control. When we start to see that powerlessness, that lack of control on some of those things that are most closely related to you, so we also see some of that breakdown in hope and some of that hopelessness. And so we want to kind of stop that spiral. So if we can identify the facts and understand what's going on, I think that really better equips us to choose and select those tools that are available to us to really have the greatest effect in positive outcomes with our kiddos. With that, we want to look at what are some of those messages that they might be hearing. So think about those kids and wherever they fall within that spectrum. What are they hearing? What is happening? And one thing that we can talk about with COVID and the school closures and the pandemic and everything that's been happening since March is that everyone to some degree has felt some additional stress, some additional trauma. We're looking at this as collective trauma. All of us have had increased stress and trauma. It's just the degree of the effects of that stress and trauma that may be different. But we can say categorically, we can make that blanket statement, I think, that everyone has experienced increased stress, anxiety during this time. But let's really drill down and look at our kiddos specifically. We started to see some of these impacts clear back with 9/11 is when I really started hearing the talk in more general settings. So in counseling, therapeutic, mental health settings, we would hear a lot about the effects of trauma and how that impacts with kids and their ability to connect and their ability to be successful socially and academically. I didn't hear it as much or as often or to the same degree with my teacher friends or in the education setting. But then with 9/11, that's where I really started to see that increase in people focusing on the effects of societal messages and the impact on kids. And so if you think back to some of the lessons learned from 9/11, we learned that when we continued to play those videos over and over and over, and every time we would turn on the TV, we were finding that a lot of kids were reliving it. So where adults had the ability to kind of compartmentalize or to process that, yes, this was a one-time event that we're seeing again, kids were really internalizing that as it happening every single time they saw it. And so we started to really pay attention to how those messages were affecting the social, emotional, and academic outcomes or performance with our kiddos. So as we think about today and what they're seeing and what they're consuming, what they are receiving from the content that they're consuming, let's look at a few things. First, when we look at the average kiddo spends about 11 hours a day in front of a screen. Now, I believe that is from 2017. Kaiser Family Foundation does that study every year of how much time kids ages 8 to 18 spend in front of a screen. And I believe it's 2017, it was up to 11 hours a day. So we think about what kiddos were consuming through technology. What were some of the messages? And so if you think about that and think about just the kiddos that you work with, what are some of the things that they were consuming on those screens? And I will share, and Stephanie, if people start putting in their chats, what are they hearing? What are they consuming in front of a screen? And I'll tell you, let's just start with YouTube. And so let's talk a minute about boys. They say 80% of users on YouTube are boys. What are boys, especially our younger boys, our school-age boys, what are they consuming on YouTube?
Rap videos, gaming,
okay.
Yes.
Rap videos, they might have some pretty strong
violence.
Some violence, right? This is where we saw that kiddos,
sex.
I see some sex, pornography.
Girls.
Girls. So being fed some pretty negative content there, some swearing, I see that, very nice.
Weapons.
Weapons, yes. How do we solve problems? Through violence, through weapons, through aggression. Okay, yes. TikTok, absolutely. We have to pay attention to what's going on there as well. A lot of body image things. We talked about boys with girls. We see a lot of those body image things.
Riots.
Messages, riots. Yeah, absolutely. So we see some of that. Now take that in comparison with those same kiddos, 8 to 18, and a study that was done by Drs. Harry and Rosemary Wong. How much time do those kids spend talking to their parents every day? Talking. And on average, the average American parent or caregiver spends approximately 12 minutes a day talking to their kids. So what do you think that that sounds like? What do you think that that talk sounds like with kids? That 12 minutes a day with their parents, what are they hearing? And I was paying attention to this. We had dinner with some friends last night that have a 3-year-old and a 6-year-old, and they are just trying to balance everything, right, with kids. They are doing virtual learning. And so here's just a few of the things that I heard in that amount of time. Carson, do your homework. Carson, sit down. You need to sit down. Stop touching your sister. You need to stop. Okay, put your iPad down so that we can have dinner. It is time to eat dinner. Okay, thank you. Nice job. Thank you. Carson, it's time to get ready for bed. No, don't argue. It is time for bed. Okay, thank you. So hearing some of those things, what are some of the other things that we're hearing in the chat, maybe, Stephanie?
Nagging about chores, homework, like you were hearing, grades,
Okay.
homework, turn off your screen, those types of corrections, just that quick management. And then you think about on top of everything now with, if prior to this past year we were only, the average was 12 minutes, now parents are carrying a much higher level of stress too because of maybe everyone being at home, all of those types of things. So the 12 minutes can be, I love you, get your homework done. Are you in class?
Good. We do have some of those positive things, but a lot of times it's giving instructions or correcting things are what we tend to spend more time focusing on naturally. Now then think about their interactions with peers. Now first of all, we know that they've been reduced. Overall, since March, their interaction with their peers have been reduced. But what do you think that those interactions, especially these kiddos that are really struggling, we go back to those kiddos in the void, right? Those kiddos that the attendance has gone down, we're not seeing them as much. Those kiddos that are kind of missing out on some of those things may have more struggles. What do you think that their interactions with their peers are like? What are some of those things that they might be hearing? I hate school.
Yes.
Right?
One of the things that differential, I've been hearing a lot of people where it's hard for kids who are who are having to stay at home, do those types of things, but then they're seeing other people not do it. And
oh my goodness.
Where I'm staying at home and but they're out experiencing things. I just see emails saying, "What are you doing? Do you want to play Minecraft?" So there are some positives where, at least with technology, we can have some interactions in that way, and hopefully it's a positive interaction like Minecraft, not some of the others.
Yes, some of the other things that might be happening. Good. And then you think about what are they hearing from teachers, and what would that have sounded like? What were some of those things that they were hearing from teachers, especially those kiddos that might have really been struggling, behaviorally, turn your camera on, right? Good. What else?
Oh, yeah, and think about, turn your camera on, sit down, pay attention. No, don't do that. Can you pay attention?
Right.
Good.
Focus. Good. And some of those good things. I saw that. Thank you for sharing. I appreciate you being here today. Yeah, so some nice ones. So we see some of those positives as well. But when we look at the averages, right, and this pretty well falls along what we tend to see, and what we're finding here are the negatives. We have 5, 10, 23 negatives. Let's see, 23 negative, on average, 20, that is a beautiful 3, nice job. And 7 positives, so that is about a 3, right, 3 to 1. On average, about 3 negative to every 1 positive comment that kids are hearing. So when we go back to some of those statistics, and they're not, yes, Tyra, I agree, these numbers need to be flipped. You're exactly right. So how do we flip that? And that really is the question, really is the point. Stephanie, thank you for putting together this little handout. This will be in your packet. I think it's a great activity to really help us put into perspective what kids are receiving, right? We used to talk about their buckets, right? Are we filling their buckets? And so as we look at this, we see that a lot of our kids have pretty empty or leaky buckets. So what can we do to kind of shift that and provide that motivation, that recognition that they need, that positive reinforcement to really shift this so that kids can start to build better that social emotional, their social interactions, because we know when they're social emotional capacities are built up, it feeds right into academic success. So let's look at some of that. And we're going to really look, anytime we have monumental challenges, even the biggest challenges, it seems like always we go back to the smallest solutions. Even to the biggest challenges, we always come back to it's the smallest things that oftentimes are the most impactful solutions. And that's what really praise is and reinforcement. We look at when kiddos that have experienced high levels of stress and trauma, anxiety, that the more we can increase their reinforcements, that intentional praise, and praising not only their behavior, but not only just praising academic successes, but praising behavioral successes, really starts to provide that safety and structure that starts to mitigate some of the effects of trauma. So looking at the effects of how praise really does have an impact, there's a lot of power in praise. We also know that praise helps to build resilience. These are two things that are going to have to be at the forefront of our minds as educators, no matter how we engage with kiddos, no matter what job we perform in that school environment. We all have the power of change, and that change really starts with using praise in impactful and intentional ways. Now, we've known this for a really long time. We've known that we need to shift to more positive behavior supports, right? And so what was 18 years ago, I think it's been 18 years now, that Rob Horner and George Sugai started with that framework of positive behavior interventions and support. And we all, as educators, if you've been doing this for as long as I have, we all really have that desire to focus more on being positive, creating those positive environments rather than really focusing on historical of control types of forms of environment. We knew we're not healthy, that we were not getting the outcomes that we wanted. And so we all started to look at increasing the praise, right? I can remember being on committees in my middle school and wonder, raising the praise. A lot of times we didn't exactly know what that meant or what that looked like. We just were kind of trying to be more positive in general. And I think a lot of times we would go to these really motivational trainings, professional development or conferences, and we'd hear all these great motivational statistics and analogies, all this great stuff, and we think, okay, this is awesome. This is, just kind of invigorated our passion for our profession, right? And then we go back to our schools, we go back to our classrooms, and then we'd be face-to-face with real-life kids and good feeling thoughts. Because there was nothing practical, right? We know that we want to be more positive, but we didn't know how. And so that's when we started to really look at the science behind, okay, if we're going to try and raise the praise, we're going to try and develop these positive environments and create these cultures of learning, then how much praise do we need to use and what does that praise look like? And that's really where we're going to go next, is how much praise, and then what does that praise really, how do we define praise? So how much is too much? And we go back to the Gottman Institute. So I was at a PBIS leadership conference about 6 years ago, and I was listening to Rob Horner. He was giving a talk, a session on the importance of praise to shape behavior. And he said that, it's something that they've been referencing for years, that we want to find this 4-to-1, so 4 positive for every 1 negative interaction in the classroom. And he said, I got to thinking about that, and I called up George, and I said, hey, where did we pull this from? And he said, well, I think that 4-to-1, I think it comes from Boys Town. And so he said, I called the research department at Boys Town, and they said, well, no, we've been referencing that as well, but it's not our research that came to that. And so they started looking, and they went back to, it was the Gottman Institute that really had the initial or the beginning research on how much praise is necessary to build healthy relationships or to develop healthy environments. And so they call this the magic ratio. And what Gottman found was he was looking at a 5-to-1. Now, let me tell you, 6 years ago, when we first started looking at this, he was saying 7-to-1. So it's changed a little bit over time. Looking at how much praise do what is our target number? And so we found with the research that has been conducted in schools, we're finding that that 4-to-1 ratio in that general environment, so a general setting, 4-to-1 is a good target place for us to be to build and maintain a healthy environment, healthy learning environment. Now, if you get to 7-to-1, excellent. We're not going to stop you. But you think about that, just in any normal relationship. Now, we've got this research originated was in marital relationships. And he could predict in the couples that he was counseling with or working with, just by observing their interactions, he was able to predict with over 90% accuracy whether that marriage was going to succeed or fail, just based on this magic ratio. So with marital relationships or partnerships, he's looking at a 12-to-1, right? So you want to have 12 positive interactions for every negative 1 interaction with your life partner, okay? And so think about that, just with us as human nature. We all crave reinforcement. We all crave that praise in what we do, even if it's just those day-to-day things, even if it's just the minutiae of the day, the things that you do every single day, and someone says, hey, you know what, I really appreciate that you did that today. Ooh, wow, you know, that's great. It gives you that motivation to continue doing it. Think about if you go out and someone makes a comment on what you're wearing, and they say, wow, you look great today. That really compliment. You look really nice today. The next time that you go to your closet and you really need that burst of confidence, you're drawn to that same outfit. Well, as we look at what's going on in our schools, especially today, and we're asking ourselves, how do we increase that motivation? Praise is a great way to do it. Because if our kiddos are coming into our environment, whether it is virtual, blended, or full-on face-to-face, the more positive we are, the more reinforcing we can be, the more they're going to want to continue to come and be a part of that. So when we look at how much is too much, I don't think that you can have too much, but what are we shooting for? We know we have to balance, right? We have to balance academic and social emotional. We want to be targeting that 4-to-1 in our general ed environment. Now, I don't know if I saw this question, but I'm going to answer it. In our specialized environments or alternative environments are kiddos that we know need higher levels of support. In those environments, we're looking for 8-to-1. Because you think about those kiddos that have really empty or really leaky buckets, they need additional motivation. So when we talk about in that general ed environment, we're going to try and target that 4-to-1. Our kiddos in alternative placements or that need additional support, we're really going to try and be looking at that 8-to-1. All right.
Steph, will you also, one other, when you're thinking about the ratio too, and I know you're going to get to this, but we had some questions, we kind of had some comments about shaping of behavior and increase certain times when you might need to increase that ratio, and that will be with like you said, in when your kiddos are telling you what they need, you might start higher and then move back. But I know we're going to get to that, definitely. And also talking about some of the challenges that everyone is facing with how students' buckets are even less full and leaking even more with their inability that they aren't able to come to school and sometimes get away from those family dynamics that they use school as a refuge.
Exactly. Yes, yes. So you're looking at some of those rates of reinforcement, and we'll talk a little bit more about that after I introduce the different types of praise that we can use. And then we can start to look at how do we apply that to individual students and individual behaviors as we start to identify those uniqueness for each of our students. So what are you doing currently? If you can just type in your chat box, what are you currently doing to praise students? I know that we all have our own ways that we reinforce and praise kids. What are some of the things that you do? So verbal, Sarah, thank you. Yeah, we do a lot of verbal. Nice job, fantastic. Public recognition, right? Woo-hoo, yes, yes. Verbal praise, a lot of verbal praise. That's fantastic. Oh, Dojo's a great place to do it. Fantastic. Yes, yes. I like that idea of handwritten notes. Absolutely. Even I'm seeing I keep coming back to the phrase of everything. I keep hearing people say things have changed so much. And through that, I'm starting to really focus on the more things change. Who can finish that for me? The more things change, the more they stay the same, right? The more things change, the more they stay the same. We still need that human interaction. We still need that reinforcement. So while the tools have changed, the platforms have changed, the basic needs of who we are really haven't changed a whole lot. So I love that handwritten note, because I'm seeing that more. I've heard more teachers say that they're sending out postcards. And my husband works for the post office, so yay, I'm glad we're seeing a return to snail mail, right? We're sending some of those messages because we see that it's powerful to have that handwritten note. Nice. Post things in the chat. Yes, yes.
I love that there's an option here of the wheel of names, and that's a fun one where you can, and that they have the link. And for everyone who is for the chat, if you want to choose everyone will be able to see. But also, if you're not seeing all the chats, we will post it all afterwards too.
Awesome. Yeah. So great ideas. So some of those verbal things, those handwritten things, nice. So we know that we do those pretty naturally, but we don't want to live in just those. We want to have a balance. And so where I said that we would go to these professional developments on building positive behavior support, we would feel really good, and we'd go back and we would still have the same tools. And what we would refer to that is that general praise. We know how to do general praise pretty well. And what general praise is just that. It's very general. We're not telling kids what they did necessarily to earn that praise, but they know that something good happened. In general, something good happened. And so we're looking at that 4-to-1. We want to see some of this general praise plugged in, right? Just the thumb and a click, I used to say. Nice job, right? Give yourself a round of applause. Or how about that rodeo? Yeah, right? Like they knew something good happened, but they don't know exactly what. And that's general praise. We also know that there is specific praise. And so we look at, with some kiddos, again, as we look at rates of reinforcement, someone had asked that question, with most kids in that general setting environment, they're just going to need that general praise. Nice job. I appreciate you. Fantastic. That's going to be all they need. And then we're going to sprinkle in some specific praise, right? Nice job finishing that problem. They know exactly what they did. It's that general praise with the specificity behind it. Here's what you did to earn that praise. So they know exactly what they did. They know exactly what to do again to get that same praise. So we might want to sprinkle some of that. So with kiddos that are fairly good at following instructions, we might sometimes want to just throw in some specific praise of nice job following instructions. It just kind of reinforces, sort of like what I said earlier about we all have our daily list of things that we're doing to prepare when we go into our classroom or when we're doing our jobs. We pretty well know we have things that we need to do every single day that we need to take care of. We do those because we've internalized that, right? It's part of our routine. It's our ritual. But what makes it even better is when someone notices that routine or ritual and just really labels that. You know what? I really appreciate how you come in and turn the coffee on every day. I'm going to keep going in and turning the coffee on every day. You're not trying to teach me to do that, but it's nice to hear. It's nice to be reinforced for that sometimes. Do I need to hear it every single day? No, right? It gets a little old at that point, right? But
it's so nice to see that someone notices. You know, that specificity is so key of where you're like, oh, thank you.
Yeah, you're going to keep doing it, but it's really nice to know that someone appreciates it. Awesome, that's exactly right. So as we look at this general praise and specific praise, and we tie this to some of the trauma models and resiliency, we want to find those specific things that we can praise. And so we look at praising the effort to get to the finish line. So not just praising the end result, but praise the effort that was put into it. And think about, again, we see this in the classroom all the time. Some of our kiddos, we will hand out an assignment even though it's the first time we've introduced the concept, and you're going to have some of those kids that just click, it just clicks with them, and they get it all, and they do it immediately, and they get it all correct. But then you have others that didn't click with, but they have to, and they put a lot of effort. So while they may not have finished all 5 problems, they got 2 problems done, but it was the effort that they put into it. We can reinforce that. We can praise that effort. We can also praise social skills. And when you look at whatever model that you're looking at, and Boys Town has done this historically, but really looking at specific social skills that kids need in order to be successful in a multitude of spaces and places. If we can praise those specific skills, we know then that they start to internalize those skills, and then they're able to generalize those skills. So finding those specific social skills that we can use some of that specific praise. Nice job sharing. Nice job working together. You know what? You did an awesome job accepting that feedback. I know it's hard sometimes. So we can reinforce, we can praise those social skills. We also want to praise ideas, the thought process to get to that end point. So even though they may not have come to the correct solution or conclusion of the problem, the effort or the thought process that went into it. So tell me how you got to that. Tell me how you got to that end result. And as they think through it, you can reinforce that thought process. So reinforce those ideas and how they were thinking about it. And then also you want to be able to reinforce approximation, right? So with this one, these 2 kiddos, they're obviously greeting one another. They're excited to see each other. They're greeting one another. And pre-COVID, we would have said this is a great way to greet one another, right? They're smiling. They're going to give each other a high five. They're holding each other's hands. This is a great way to greet pre-COVID. So now we're not just going to correct that. We're going to reinforce, we're going to praise the approximation. They're still trying to greet one another, which is a great skill, but remember, now that we're trying to social distance, how about just an elbow high five, okay? Or maybe just an ankle high five, right? So we're going to still use praise, even though they might not be doing it completely correctly, we're going to reinforce the approximation. We're going to reinforce the try.
You know, that's a key comment that's been going through the chat so far of what an effective tool and strategy this praise and reinforcement can be even in situations of correction or approximations and that type of thing. Yes, absolutely.
Yep, awesome. And then finally, we can reinforce, we can praise the end result. So they worked together, they accomplished their goal. We want to reinforce that. We want to praise that as well. So it gives you different areas. And again, when you start to apply that specific praise, this gives you a few more things to pull from to be specific about. And again, we know that by applying these forms of praise are looking for these areas, so kind of expanding beyond just academic and reinforcing some of these other areas, that then builds resiliency, and it's one of the keys to addressing some of the effects of trauma and stress. So it's going to increase that motivation and increase that personal empowerment with kids because they start to internalize that reinforcement. So we talked about general and specific and applying these 5 different areas to be specific about. But we know that some kids are going to need more than just tying it to the skill. They're going to need to review what those steps are or what that process is. And so at Boys Town, we call this effective praise. And it is our most intensive version, our most intensive praise strategy is effective praise. And what it does is it takes that general praise and specific praise, but then adds on that reinforcement or a positive consequence. a reason or a positive consequence. So let's look at some effective praise. So we're going to do that thumb and a click. Nice job. You did an awesome job of following instructions. And you know, when you're able to follow instructions like that, you're much more likely to get your work done more quickly, which is going to leave more time for you at the end of the period to do what you would like to do. That's a kid reason. It's going to give you more time to do what you want to do. Now, a reason isn't a promise. A reason is a possibility. If you're able to keep doing it this way, it is much more likely that you're going to get done and you're going to have some time for yourself to do what you want to do. Now, is that always going to happen? No, because there's going to be times that even though you follow instructions, it still takes you to the end of the time, right? But it's giving them a reason, so it's providing that motivation up front. You know, we don't want to, it's kind of that not waiting for the delayed gratification. We're telling them right up front, you know what, if you're able to follow instructions like that, you're much more likely to have more time to do what you want to do. Keep up the good work. So it just ties that additional motivator. So think about some of those kiddos that really, really struggle. Let's talk about maybe being in, participating in class, okay? And so you have this young person that every single day, you know, they shuffle in and they just sit down, maybe put their head down on the desk and don't really engage. And then this one day, right, it's like the clouds open up, the skies, you know, all on earth, oh, right? And he answers a question. Wow, we are going to use effective praise in that moment with that student. Now, your chatty student who is always engaged, right, we're probably not going to have to use that level of effective praise. We might just use some of that general praise now and again. But with that individual that has really not ever engaged or participated, and now we see that spark of interest, we're going to follow that immediately with some effective praise. Because we want to really ensure or make it even more possible that it happens again. So we're going to give them a reason. We might even give them a positive consequence. Now, I've seen some of these that, well, what if these kiddos don't want to be called out in front of everyone? Yes, you know your kids. You can still use it, but use it privately. You know what? I really thought it was awesome when you answered that question today. It was fantastic. And because you were able to do that, I'm going to take 4 questions off your homework for tomorrow. Awesome, awesome work. So it gives them that benefit to see why they might want to try it again. So that effective praise is going to be your most intentional and intensive form of reinforcement or providing praise, but it's also going to be incredibly effective in shaping those behaviors that kids might struggle with the most. So as you look at sort of that rate of reinforcement or the continuum of when you use general, specific, and effective, think about where kids are in mastering that skill. If it's something that you rarely, if ever, see them engage in or even try, you're probably going to want to use effective praise. If it's something that they do pretty much every day, we still want to acknowledge it. We're probably going to use some of that general or specific praise. But we have different tools to apply in different situations. And again, we go back to where we started and knowing that if we're going to shift some of these numbers, we're going to have to, and we are the front line of defense. As educators, we have always been boots on the ground, front line of defense for our kiddos and families. If we're going to continue that and we're going to shift some of these effects of what we've all been experiencing, we want to increase that enrollment, we want to increase attendance, we want to reconnect with kiddos and decrease some of that depression and anxiety, we are going to have to be more effective in pulling out our tools to reinforce and use praise. Now, we talked about reasons, and I wanted to just spend a minute on, because reasons sometimes are hard to think of. And so Boys Town has done a really nice job of tying some of those skills, those social skills, and then tying those to reasons to do it again. So you don't have to just be thinking of it on your own. We think of reasons that are going to be most meaningful to kids. We're going to start with the ABCs. The A, to avoid a negative outcome. So you want to keep following instructions so that you don't have to have homework later. Avoid a negative outcome. Or a benefit to self. You know what? If you keep following instructions, you're going to have more time at the end of class to do what you want to do. Benefit to self. And then the C is concern for others. Concern for others sometimes can be difficult for our kiddos just developmentally, right? So think about kids where they are developmentally at this age is a lot of times they're going to be living in that they want to avoid a negative or what's in it for me, right? Then they start to broaden, right? As those social emotional competencies start to develop further, they start to really develop that concern for others. So we can use that concern for others. You know what? When you're able to follow instructions like that, it doesn't disrupt the rest of the class and they're able to get their work done too. Okay? So as you look at some of the different reasons that you can use, now I'll tell you, I was working with a group of teachers in Arizona, and one of them done a beautiful job of when she was talking with her kids about different social skills, she would ask them, what would be some reasons that you would want to follow instructions? Or what are some reasons that you want to be able to disagree like this? And through that discussion, the kids came up with a list of reasons. And so as they were sharing those reasons, she was writing them down, and then she made those into a poster and hung them on the wall. And so when she was working with a student, she needed to think of a reason. She could just glance up at the poster of reasons that they had created, which then made it not only more effective, but it was also much more personal because it was something that was meaningful to the kids. So I thought that was a really great way to come up with those reasons. So like I said, Boys Town has paired some of those positive reasons to engage in the social skills, but you can also do that with your kiddos and see what's meaningful to them. But finding those specific kid-focused reasons for them to continue to engage, to empower them with that praise and those reasons and consequences. All right, fantastic. So we have covered a lot of information. Hopefully you feel like you're walking away with some new tools when it comes to promoting and prompting positive behaviors, making small celebrations, creating that sense of success. Any questions from the group?
There was one in the chat of when I ask how you came up with this idea, kind of praising the process, the child gets upset. And I've also praised about good outcomes and reinforced, and yet the child gets upset and shuts down. What would be the next thing to do? Maybe ask them, what are some things that you really like? And get a list from kiddos and then try to start applying some of those. Also, some of that motivational, as you kind of have those motivational discussions, so reinforce the things that they've done well. You know what, I really appreciate it. You did a nice job putting your name on the paper. Now let's look at question number 1. You know what, I saw you yesterday. You did such an awesome job with this. Let's try doing it with this one. So some of that motivational interviewing or that motivational discussion, so build on what they've already done and then work forward. So toy is the answer of what they really like. So is that, Tiffany, are you? Okay, so there is something that motivates. Work towards that, right? So we don't want to start with a toy. That's a pretty big consequence, in the beginning. So if that is what's meaningful to you, let's work through, let's get some of that reinforcement. So let's make it to this point, and then we'll work towards the toy. So if you are able to participate in class 3 out of 5 days, then on day 5 you can earn that toy. So kind of pull out the schedule of reinforcement. And Tiffany, I think there's some other tools and resources we can share with you, and we'll put on, as some of these questions come up that are bigger than we have time for, we will incorporate those on the webinar page and add some additional resources. So we've got more for you. I did have another question that came up that I wanted to get to is, we just had a conversation with teachers yesterday, and they don't like the idea of praising students who only do good things once in a while. How can you get those teachers to buy in? They think it is totally unfair to praise those students for small things when other kids do it all the time naturally. And that is challenging, but that's what we're looking at. We know that there are different needs for different kiddos. So it's kind of like we said when we look at that schedule of reinforcement or applying those different rates, it's not that we are not going to reinforce all kids.
we're going to reinforce at the level that they need. And so if that young person needs a lot of extra help in accomplishing a goal or getting to that same point that someone else doesn't have to put a whole lot of effort into, we're going to try and provide them and front load them with as much support and reinforcement as they need to get to that same level. So think about it if you're doing triage, right? And if you have kiddos, you have one that just, you have one person that just has a scratch, you have one person that has a broken arm, and you have someone else that was completely thrown out of the accident and needs emergency care. Well, if we said we're going to do the same thing for everyone because that person with a scratch, all they need is a Band-Aid, so everyone gets a Band-Aid, right? We wouldn't do that. And it's kind of the same thing when we look at those rates of reinforcement. Yes, you're exactly right. There are some kiddos that are just going to do it because they've internalized it, and they're doing it for their own personal intrinsic rewards. We have other kiddos, we want to get them there, but they're going to need a lot more external reward or external motivation to get to that same level.
Well, and also think about it in academics. If behavior is just like academics, and if you have a student that needs more help academically, then you're going to give it to them, and there's going to be some kids that get it. And there was a couple, again, more comments of where equality is not the same as equity, and that it's fair and equal. It's not that you're being unfair to other kids. You are giving kids the support that they need, because every kid is going to show us at some point that they need some level of support, and that's what's equal, is meeting kids where they are at.
Exactly. Yes. Good.
We have another question of, we're a hardcore MTSS PBIS school. Can you speak to how easily Boys Town can be incorporated into our current systems? Yeah, absolutely. So we get that question a lot. And so I'm going to go back to, we start to really look at building the tiers. We need to have that glue that binds us. And I think that applying not only the skill teaching, which is a foundation of PBIS or MTSS, looking at those social skills, what are we teaching, but then what is the dosage that you need? And I think that that's where Boys Town really provides that glue to really put together that framework, to keep that framework together. So for example, we just went through different types of praise. And so if we think about how that's going to apply into, or how that's going to connect with PBIS or multi-tiered systems, is that in that general ed classroom, we're going to primarily be living in general and specific praise. That's what we're going to use most of the time to meet the majority of needs of our kiddos in that tier 1 setting, or that general universal setting. We're going to be using general and specific praise. But in tier 2, those kiddos that need just a little extra support in certain areas, we're going to be using more specific and effective, right? We're going to be more intentional in those tier 2, those small group settings. We're going to practice more. We're going to be using more of that effective praise and that specific praise, so that they're hearing that over, that repetition, so that they really start to internalize it. And then in tier 3, right, that upper tier, that alternative setting, we're going to be living in effective praise. We're going to be tying a reason or a positive consequence as often as possible, because that's the level of support that kiddos need. So what the Boys Town model does is it really sets that foundation for all of us as educators. We all know what the interventions are. We're all going to be using them, but we are going to apply them at different dosages. And really, that's the difference, that should be the difference between your tiers, is we're all using, right, the same inoculation, right? And that analogy really works well for us today, right? We're going to all be using the same inoculation, but we're going to be using different dosages based on the need. So how much we use, right, at tier 1 and what we apply at tier 1 is going to be different than how much we use it at tier 2. I hope that answers that question. Yeah, I think that's...
And with the Boys Town model, we go into this, not only the reinforcement strategies, but we go into the proactive teaching strategies, and we also go into correction strategies. So it really kind of removes that curtain, so that all of us, regardless of how we're connecting with kids within the tiers, we all have the same tools. It's just how much we apply them at different levels.
Exactly. Yes, and we had, if you missed anything from last month, we did have a a webinar on some of the proactive tools and those different types of tools and strategies you can use to help set kids up and teach the social skills and procedures and all of those types of things. And so each month we're going to have another conversation, and we have it scheduled for February too. So we'll send that out to you. And I posted the link in the chat to the webinar page where our December webinars the recorded webinars are available. And you guys will get all of this for attending today and being part of this great conversation. And I'll tell you all of the things that you share in the chat. I mean, you guys, great conversations there.
Nice. Yes, and join us next month. We're going to talk about a roadmap so that we stay out of content. We stay out of content when we're talking about behavior. So staying on focus, staying on path when we are talking about behavior. So join us next month. It's another really fun topic.
And is there any other questions? We're at 1:55. I think we did a great use of time. Like I said, everyone, you will get the email for the link when we'll get it all produced and posted to the website. We'll also send you a link with, if anyone needs a certificate of attendance, and then you'll get a packet too with all of the information that you saw today and some other types of things. And the chat will also be posted on the webinar page. So again, thank you guys so much. Our next webinar is already scheduled and ready for you to register. And if any of your colleagues couldn't attend, they can watch the recording.
All right, go out, raise the praise.
Thank you.